That's why we're here with Equal Justice Now. And we're screaming from the top of the mountaintop. Equal justice now. Equal justice now. Equal justice now. Equal justice now. Thank you all. I hope that you engage us this evening so we can all be the better for it. Thank you. That's why we're here with Equal Justice Now. And we're screaming from the top of the mountaintop. Equal Justice Now. Equal Justice Now. Equal Justice Now. Equal Justice Now. Thank you all. I hope that you engage us this evening so we can all be the better for it. Thank you.
If I look out in the audience, I think about my name is Tammy. I'm no stranger to this morning. Don't know me. I've been here since 1995. Sitting on the anchor desk at first WRAG and then WMC. And you all know that I'm grateful for 10 years of cancer-free, which I just cleared for my So I know that this conversation is critical for me. The first time I came to this market, the first day of going out and working, I met Ben Books and his wife, Randy. Can you imagine the chills that ran through my body? I was seeing these people. It's not right as being a dark-skinned anchor woman. And let's talk about it. We all know that I was the blackest thing that Memphis had ever seen, okay? We all know. And the market
Love you, baby.
You all know that I'm grateful for 10 years of cancer-free, which I just cleared for my family. So I know that this conversation is physically shows me this key. The first time I came to this market, the first day I went out and working, I met Ben Books and his wife. So you imagine the chills that ran through my body. I was seeing these people. And not right as being a dark-skinned anchor woman. And let's talk about it. We all know that I was the blackest thing that Memphis had ever seen, okay? We all know. And the market
Love you, baby.
You all know that I'm grateful for 10 years of cancer-free, which I just cleared for my family. So I know that this conversation is physically shows me that key. The first time I came to this market, the first day I went out and working, I met Ben Books and his wife. So you imagine the children that ran on my body. And not right as being a dark-skinned anchor woman. Let's talk about it. We all know that I was the blackest thing that Memphis had ever seen, okay? We all know. And the market
Love you, baby.
You all know that I'm grateful for it. We cancer-free, which I just cleared for my family. I know that this conversation is shows me that key. The first time I came to this market, the first day I went out and working, I met Ben Books and his wife. So you imagine the children that ran on my body. And not right as being a dark-skinned anchor woman. Let's talk about it. We all know that I was the blackest thing that Memphis had ever seen, okay? We all know. And the market
Love you, baby.
you all know that I'm grateful for it. We cancer-free, which I just cleared for my family. On trial.
Thank you very much, Ben. We're going to play a very brief video to outline the framework of the conversation that we're going to have today, and then we're going to dive right in.
What do you know about bail bonds? What do you know about bail bonds and the bail bonds industry?
I don't know a whole lot.
What do you know about bail bonds? What do you know about the industry?
Well, you may be asking yourself, what is bail?
Bail is a three-party contract. It's between the bonding company, the court, and the defendant. What that means is once they go to court and they get arraigned, there's a system that they follow and guidelines to see what your bail should be.
Bail is defined as the temporary release of an accused person awaiting trial, sometimes on condition that a sum of money be lodged to guarantee their appearance in court. But ever since the tragic story of Khalif Browder exploded onto the small screen, the right to have bail has been under heavy attack.
Our conversation today will be in two parts. For the first part of our discussion, Pam and I will be posing questions to our panelists, and we encourage our panelists to pose questions to one another. And in the second part, we're going to try to incorporate any questions or concerns that you may have. So there will be, in the second part of our conversation today, volunteers with note cards. If you have a question that you'd like to submit, raise your hand. Our volunteers will get those note cards to you, and we will take your questions and add them to our discussion later today. We have a diverse panel. They bring a variety of backgrounds, experiences, and views on bail reform. As has already been said this evening, we just ask that you keep an open mind to the conversation. It's through conversation that we have the opportunity to learn different perspectives, which help us to become more informed about the world surrounding us. And with that, I'd like to, starting over here, invite each of our panelists very, very briefly to just state your position, your view on bail, so that our audience knows where you're coming from as we begin our conversation tonight. And we'll start over here. Thank you. If you talk, that mic should be able to.
Okay. Well, all right, can you hear me now? Before I get started, I just wanted to pay a little homage to Representative Barbara Cooper. She passed away a week ago, and her funeral services were yesterday. Saturday. I served along her with Representative Towns. She was there for 22 years. 26 years. I was there. I've been there for 5 years, but she was my seatmate for 1 year. So we just have a quick moment of silence for Miss Cooper, Mama Cooper. Thank you. Again, my name is State Representative Vincent Dixie. I'm the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, and I'm also a volunteer. So when you asked me what my position on bail, I think that there's an opportunity, and I'm really glad that we're having this conversation, that there's a meeting in the middle. I think there's sometimes there's like, well, we don't need bail, but then there's a time when we do need bail. And how do we meet in the middle and make sure that the defendant and the victim have their day in court? And that's where we come in to play as sponsors, to just make sure that everyone has their day in court. We don't choose sides, we just there to provide a service. And I'm sure we'll get more into that as we go, but I'll just keep it short and brief for right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all very much for inviting me. I think as a policy matter, if that's the question, I'm not sure I'm convinced that bail should exist. It seems to me that what we should do is either make a determination based on the level of offense, the criminal history, and surrounding facts and circumstances that the person is either a flight risk or a danger to the community, in which case they should not be released from trial. Or they are not one of those things, in which case they should be released pending trial, if we are to pay attention to the presumption of innocence that is supposed to be the bedrock of our criminal justice system. If it is in fact the case that we have to have a bail system, in terms of enforcing the law, right, and in my current role I have to keep a sharp distinction between what I think is a policy matter and what I will do in terms of enforcing the law. It seems to me that an absolute minimum that we need to have a fairly detailed inquiry into what the realistic financial needs of the defendant are, such that the bail should be affordable to that person.
So good afternoon, good evening. Lee Harris, Mayor of the largest, most diverse, and best county in our state, Shelby County, Tennessee. I'm really pleased to be here, pleased to be in the presence of Ben Crump. He's been in the mix in Memphis and Shelby County more than once, fighting tip of the spear, always for justice. So thank you for being here. Thanks to Amanda, Tony for organizing this convening. I won election as Shelby County Mayor in 2018. I just won re-election in 2022. So I appreciate it. And in 2018, when we came into office, we flipped all the seats from red to blue and won everything in Memphis and Shelby County in 2018. And one of the things
we came in talking about everything except for DA. We came back to that house in 2022. And one of the things we talked about often was how do we do justice with respect to what's happening at the Bailey Justice Center, frequently known as 201 Poplar. It's our jail. At the time I came in 2018, just for context, there were about over 2,500 residents of that facility. We pay about $100 a day to keep those folks housed. Dozens and dozens of them have been there for more than 500 days or more. And so for us, there was the moral quandary of these folks have not been to trial, and how do we make sure we do right by those who have been accused but not yet convicted, and also the fiscal cost of such a large detainee populations that cost us, upwards of $100 million a year to house when we have such dire poverty in Memphis and Shelby County and a whole host of needs. So we set about the task of trying to figure out how we can do what Steve Morroy talked about, which is refocus on those who are a danger in the sense that they might reoffend, and refocus on those who are at flight risk, those who are not expected to come back and be present for trial. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank all of you all for attending as well. I too have to give high kudos to other attorney Ben Hooks, which was a great attorney. He was a great old man, and his wife taught me in school. But brother, we appreciate you for all the courage, slaying your lives and making things right in our country, all the ills that we're still fighting in this country. It's so well known. We like to try to hide it, starting this critical race stuff and not being able to teach the truth. We'll always make the same mistakes. I have an amendment that's on the Constitution that's fighting against slavery that still exists in our Constitution, Amendment 3, to vote that out. We're still dealing with that. Thank you. If we're still dealing with that, we're still dealing with a lot of ills in this country. And what we have to do as a society is remember that freedom is not free. You can fight an institution and get what you think is redressed, and then 165 years later, they're still fighting it like the Civil War. Okay, so you can't be afraid to continue to fight for what is right for people, period. Now, bail is a thing that obviously I think that you should have bail. Okay, bail is a part of the Constitution, I believe, the laws that allows a person to get out and defend themselves, prepare for their case. The problem that I see with bail is how bail is many times executed. There's racism in the system. There's a tremendous amount of racism in the system of bailing. And if you are fighting racism in bail, okay, you have a problem. Now today, the psychology of people, you don't know what people do. You have people pop up, spring up, never done anything in their life. They go out and mass murder 30 people. You don't know what the heck people will do. Okay, so you have to figure out how we can mainly incarcerate those who need to be incarcerated, find redress for the first people that have been, afflicted, okay, and be fair all along the way. You got to be fair to people all along the way. But if somebody does something to your family or somebody does something to someone that you love, you want that person to receive justice. But their family wants them to receive justice as well. So we have to balance it and do what is right. And there is always a way to do what's right. You just have to have the courage. You have to expose all the lies and all the trickery and all the chicanery that's in the system and deal with that. And that means I'm here as a policymaker because we may have to address this from the state level to begin to deal with it. It's tremendously good to see this happening all over the country with Equal Justice down with Tony and Amanda and his whole crew. He has an excellent crew of people. We thank you all for waging the fight to try to bring some light to this sickness that we're dealing with. Thank you. Good to see you again, fam.
You too.
It's always one of my favorite white women. You left.
I know. That's why I said we've been here since before 1995.
Hello, my name is Ken Good. I'm an attorney from Tyler, Texas. I specialize in bail. I've written a book called Goods on Bail. I'm also a host of a podcast called The Bail Post. My position on bail is it is an integral, important part of the criminal justice system. And without it, I don't think the criminal justice system can work. And I'll make my point very briefly. I don't come from an argument about whether it's not working correctly, whether it's substantively incorrect. It's just a procedural issue with me. Bail has the lowest failure to appear rate of any release mechanism that's used today. Everything else has 200, 300, 400% worse failure to appear rate. Your criminal cases cannot get resolved or get resolved much slower than without the use of the private bail industry. And as a result, that puts pressure to dismiss cases. Currently, as of this year, I checked last year, Memphis, this county, Shelby County, almost 60% of the criminal cases disposed last year were dismissed. If your cases are dismissed, criminals see that. Who steps into the void? The criminal element, gangs, organized crime, and career criminals. So without bail, you're going to have, just on a procedural standpoint, you're going to have a pressure to dismiss cases. Without the private industry, that's what you'll have happen, whether it's intentional or whether it's just unintentional, and you'll end up having more crime. And that's what's happening here and across the country.
Thank you so much, sir.
My name is Glenn Jonas. I am a criminal defense attorney. I do state and federal, and also a civil rights attorney. And I guess I come at it from a different viewpoint. When we're talking about bail, what exactly is the problem that you're trying to solve? Okay, because in California, they tried to pass a new law where they wouldn't have bail. Instead, the judge would have two choices: detain or don't detain. Okay? And it would be based on an algorithm, which is assessing your flight risk and danger to the public. Let me just tell you right there, you're going to have a big problem. Because you look at everybody and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to help these people that need help, and you're not thinking about yourself because you don't think you could be in that position. You don't think you could be arrested. You don't think you could be falsely accused. The largest cases that you're going to get false accusations, child molestation and domestic violence. Why? Because it's leverage in a child custody battle. It happens every day. So you voted for this system now where a judge can detain you and you lose your job, you can't get out. And now you're wishing, boy, I wish we had bail back. My point is this: in California, in the statute itself, it says you're supposed to consider relative wealth. What does that mean? It means the poor defendant is supposed to post less than the rich defendant. So where is the problem? Is the problem the law, or is it the judges and their application of the law? So in your effort to try and help those people, you just gave the person that's creating the problem more power to screw them. And that's my problem with this whole bail reform issue.
Thank you so much.
Woo! Y'all put me at the end. I'm going to take a little more time because I'm the only woman up here. I want to say two things. Well, I want to say more than two things. First thing is, as a community organizer, I want to say that if we really want community to be part of this conversation, we must allow for them to participate in ways that we might not agree with. It is important for me to hear when the audience disagrees. So we have allowed clapping, we have allowed the ways that we can respond positively, but there are going to be things that I say or anybody else says that we need to know that the community that is here. So I would like to first see how can folks share their disagreement with what is said audibly. If it's not a boo, if it's not. So I'd like to think about that. As we were asked at the beginning, the framing at the beginning, is I just want to be able for folks to share their disagreement as well.
Rashida, I think that we're not suppressing anybody's belief. We're just asking people to respect the civility.
I hear that.
Don't clap.
Well, I think there's a difference between not clapping and disagreement. Some people might not clap because they just might not feel moved by it. And again, y'all don't have to necessarily change it, but I do want to bring that into the room. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay. Think thumbs up, thumbs down. That's fine.
And to your point, just not to interrupt your flow, but that's also why we are making sure that there are no cards available. Because we do want to hear from people in mind. We do want to understand the thoughts, feelings, and concerns that people have about everything that's being said up here. Yeah. And that's also why we made that table available to people.
I hear. And I'm not challenging that that's not the intention. But I am saying when we don't allow people to audibly in the same way on the alternative side, we're limiting what we hear and have to be accountable for. That's part of organizing.
So how do you feel about this?
So I got another thing for you. I hear you, Pam, you moving me, but I'm gonna go a little bit. So we're gonna go a little bit slower, just a minute. The other thing that I want to make a point about is the framing. Bail, I think there should have been some more participation about the framing video. Bail itself happens inside the system. It can happen with or without bail bondsmen. It's not a requirement that that has to happen, and there's a reason that that private interest is sitting at the table. And I think that's important to know. Bail lobbyists, even if you are representing us, bail itself, the bail bondsman industry, benefits from bail. That's how they make money. That is not a requirement of the system. And so in the framing where we bring in and explain bail and we explain what the system is, we put that bail bondsman there as if it's a mandatory part, and I think that's important to name that it's not. I don't mind it being part of the conversation. I do mind it being part of the framing. Now, my attention, my way I think about bail bond reform is very clear. I don't think this is a legislative only issue. And I think when we come to the table and think about it is, how can we legislate? There's a binary between 2 and 4. We've already limited what we're talking about. I am looking at this as, what are the human rights at the center of this? And how do we ensure that a person maintains their human rights to fight their case? When we talk about bail, and we talk about, it's a scare tactic to move us to think about rapists and murderers and criminals. Because at the time, the people we're talking about are just accused. We know that jail is the penalty for people accused of a crime. That is the penalty for them. So when we're talking about flight risks, when we're talking about people that may serve, that may be found guilty, they still have not yet been found guilty. They still have a right to their attorney, their presumption of innocence, their proof, and there's a way that we have to mitigate what is good as a community and what is good for the person and the individual in the center. That's not all legislation. That's not all jail, right? And when we continue to look at it as if those are the only options, when we don't let community in, we don't think about what are the other ways somebody might be able to do both things. When we don't let that possibility in, then we get this binary. And there is no meeting in the middle on somebody's humanity. We have to decide that that's what we are centering first, and then we can talk about the logistics. But we have not decided that we believe, remember this belief comes before us, right? That's a constitutional belief that comes before us. We have to first believe that every person, even when our fear is telling us that this person is a danger, they have been charged with it. We have all been accused of some shit we have done and not done, right? And we know what it's like to be accused and have to fight to be heard. How do we make that easier for a person and also make it safe? And to me, that's more than just bail. And so that's the perspective that I look at this from.
So let's dive in first with, I'm just going to pose this to the panel. Taking into account the conversation we've had brought, I'm going to open this up a little bit. Does bail create a disparate system for minority communities and those that are economically disadvantaged? I'll open that up to the panel for conversation.
Yes.
One thought around property, would you mind?
Someone's freedom in trial and not the crime on their ability, clearly is going to have a disproportionate impact on people who have less to pay, people who have less, right? And it doesn't rocket science. I see that. And even the fact that, terms of people that less than racial minorities. You move further into county, Shelby County, in which 1 out of 4 people languishing behind bars waiting for their day in court for more than 500 days. And the longer that you are in there, the more likely you are to be black, right? And yes, you can say, well, you know, if you set the bail at the right amount, then maybe you can deal with that. But as a practical matter, you're not going to set the bail like that. That doesn't really happen. And you can say, oh, well, you can put 10% down and we're going to bail on nothing against anybody's contributions, but the problem there is that you don't get 10% back, even if you eventually are acquitted. You were justified. And for many people, that 10% is a significant sum of money that is going to be really difficult. In the meantime, while they're waiting for the day in court because they can't afford bail, they're missing out on their families, their education, their jobs, their lives are being disrupted. So even at the end of the day, when you say, okay, we made a mistake, you are free, which happens a lot in Shelby County. A large percentage of those people eventually will be released without a conviction. By then it's too late, you've disrupted their lives. So yes, are there racial and socioeconomic disparities that are very, very concerning? Yes. And now, here's why water's wet.
We all understand, most of everybody in here understands how systemic racism has disenfranchised us since the beginning of 1619. We understand that. But you mentioned something, Joe.
tomorrow. And as a result of the policies going, the pendulum swinging too far, you may see another 80s style pushback, which I think could have been prevented. And so, that's not good for either side. It's not good for the left or the right for the pendulum to swing too far.
I would like to say, yeah. One, I think, again, that's a very leading question because there's a lot of assumptions in the question. I think, again, I want to just bring us back to this. A person accused of accused of a crime is not a criminal. And the majority of folks fighting for bail are not, have not been proven guilty. That is important to keep naming, because when you go back to the framing, you say, these criminals, these this, you have already judged them. You've already decided that they are guilty. We've already taken their humanity in just that question. That is the core of this, right? And so, to this point about there's a dog whistle happening when we keep going back to rapists, to murderers, to the fear of lawlessness, to the fear. Crime rises in part because we keep criminalizing shit. That's the core thing. Over-policing leads to that, right? Y'all hear something on another panel? We keep, and yes, we are going through this again. And what we are not doing is gathering the lessons. We have seen that legislation only, jail only, that is not working. Accountability is more than jail. Accountability looks like more than locking somebody up. There is accountability in many of the reforms. The question about what can we do, and then bringing us right back to the binary bail and no bail, people lawlessness or not, that's just not true. That's not what we're in. And most people know about bail who live a regular life because we have normally had to pay it. I don't know it because I am with Black Lives Matter. This was what I know. I know it because I've been in jail. My mama been in jail. My people been in jail. We pay it. And you may think you have the money. My 16-year-old got pulled over for crumbs. Some crumbs, which was mostly CBD that they didn't test. They charged her with 6 counts. They charged her for the crumbs. They charged her for the ashtray that was a gift, a makeup tray that they said was drug paraphernalia. They broke her window, pulled her out of the car, dragged her on the ground from a traffic stop. Her initial bail was going to be $100,000. So no, most of us have no idea and are not prepared to pay bail. It affects you. It affects everyone. We don't have the resources. Now, what I have learned from Black Lives Matter as a bail fund is when we pay the whole bail, right, when we provide folks the resources that they need to get back to jail, most of what the other data says that's not included in this, is most of the reasons folks don't appear are simple things like need transportation, forgotten reminders for court, because court is backlogged and they reminded you. A lot of that stuff has nothing to do with criminal intent. There is plenty of data that says that you can get folks back and forth. We have a bailee now, right? A person we have bailed out that has, on paper, 14 attempted murder charges, shows up every time. Has been in community with most of y'all. Most of y'all have seen them at any event that I have thrown. Has not been a danger. We bail folks out because we trust, and if there is a reason to think about community safety, we build that into the process when we let them out. And that can be possible in this system, in this reform. And we have to keep that as a possibility.
So, I just want to ask you just real quick on this point, is what we've got, and then we'll come over here. What we've got is a variety of viewpoints on this issue. And something that you said in the beginning about the discretion of a judge and how that applies. Cornell did a study that looked at the issue of not having bail and leaving it entirely to judicial discretion. And on the one hand, we have an alternative community-based model. On the other, we're talking about systemic legislative changes. If how do you run the risk, avoid the risk of minorities and economically disadvantaged people and people that aren't plugged into other alternative methods, community-based solutions? Where's the nexus between that?
Well, okay. A couple of things. Number one, you mentioned algorithm, and don't do that. Don't do algorithms. That's my advice to you. You're going to regret it. They've actually found that algorithms, believe it or not, become racist. Okay? And it's just another distancing, right? What Ms. Jones is explaining, and I agree with her in a large measure, is we have a person problem, we have a people problem, right? We're not managing people like they're humans and addressing their individual issue, okay? Now, I don't think it's as hard as everyone is making, and I'll tell you why. If I were king of the world, here's my solution. You know, Apple has these little GPS things now. They last for 90 days. You put it in your moped or your car or whatever, and you can track it wherever it goes. It doesn't need to be charged. So what does that mean? It means a lot of people can be released on electronic surveillance. Now, a lot of people get, it reminds them of Russia and all kinds of things, but back up a second. We have a lot of misdemeanors where the crimes may not be that serious, and it's not that serious, but we need these people to come back to court because we need to address the issue, right? I'm a criminal defense attorney. When you come to me, it's not black and white, guilty or innocent. My question is, how did you get here? What's your problem? Is it the police, or are you an alcoholic? Are you doing drugs? Do you have mental problems? How do we reroute you, right? So we can't get the people back into the courts. We can't reroute them. It shouldn't just be guilty, innocent, pay a fine, go to jail, we're done with you. That's never going to work. Never going to solve the problem. So yes, I agree. Some people, we need to have an alternative to bail. Then there's other crimes where, hey, they're so serious, maybe detention is called for, right? Murder, things like that. And then there's the middle ground. That's where we need bail. We can't just get rid of it. But I guess my final point is you got to think about the reality of the court system. When you're in Division 30 in downtown LA, there's hundreds of defendants waiting to go in front of that judge. That judge has to make a decision, and we have an inefficient process in place that doesn't consider the individual person. I think that's a large part of the problem. It can be solved, and really the solving is the education and the training of the judges to give a crap, and you have to stay an extra hour, you stay an extra hour. And if you don't take your 2-hour lunch that day, then you don't take your 2-hour lunch. You do your job.
I would like to answer that really quickly.
Please, you're welcome to Shelby County anytime. Go ahead.
No, thank you, and I promise I'll be very brief. I think that one of the things that we talk around, but we haven't not really addressing the issue. It's not just a bail reform issue; it's a criminal justice reform issue. I think bail is just a slice of the pie. Because you have to think about it, bondsmen. We don't set the bonds. We don't arrest anybody. We don't do anything. And it goes back to what the gentleman said back then. It's the judges that this falls upon. You know, bail is kind of like an easy target, it's a low-hanging fruit. Yes, we can work it in, but it's not the only answer to this. It's a bigger problem with it. As a black man, when I walk into court and I see the judge is white, the DA is white, and my public defender that I just met as I walk in is white, and we see a lot of things that is dismissed. You go in with the mentality, I'm going to take whatever they give me that I can live with, and I can get back to my life. So if it's taking a felony and they let me walk out of here, that's what I'll get, as long as I don't have to go to jail. Because they don't have good representation, and it's bigger than just this particular bail industry. It's the criminal justice reform we need to look at, and I think this is just the beginning of this conversation. And thank you for letting me.
Sure thing. So I'm going to return to your original topic of whether or not there are inequities in our system, and just talk about the system we have in Shelby County, Tennessee. 17% African American across the state, 44% incarcerated population, 54% African American population in Memphis in Shelby County, over 80% jail population at the Bailey Justice Center, over 90% juvenile detained population at our juvenile detention facility. So there's some inequities going on, and we know the vast majority of those folks that are incarcerated are impoverished because when I came in 2018, we found out that a lot of the kids in the juvenile detention facility weren't calling home because it was a charge to call home, right? Because, you know, GTL charges you to use the phones. And so we quickly got in touch with GTL and said, let's make phone calls free. And the kids started calling home every single week from there. They couldn't afford the $5 to $10 just to call home. So we know the population is impoverished. You know, so we know there's an intersection there. Just to put some of these facts on the table in Shelby County, because you're right, we have been innovating, and a lot of folks in this room have worked a great deal on the innovations in Shelby County. What we try to do now, or where we're headed, is a very customized approach when defendants have to undergo a bail hearing. And so that customized approach, we hope, if everything goes well and judicial commissioners do as we expect them to do, will include things like a little analysis of the relative wealth of the defendant. And so maybe we won't end up in the system we had before, and which is still current, which is you get arrested, there's an affidavit from law enforcement officer, and there is a questionnaire that you fill out, and then you go before a judicial commissioner. And when asked the law enforcement personnel about how much the bail should be, we can imagine that answer. It should be high. I just arrested this person. And arrests are pretty. When I brought this person in, so if you ask me what the bail should be, it should be relatively high. And then they went through the analysis, and we said, hey, we need to have a little bit more of a serious hearing to intermediate some of that. And so we're right now putting together that serious hearing later, which we hope will have a more customized approach before people are detained, and hopefully that customized approach will include the relative wealth of the defendant.
You've been waiting very patiently.
Not a problem. Part of to address the question further, and I agree with my colleague said, the mayor and the colleague down there. Part of the problem is the judge himself or herself. Okay, we need to watch the judge's behavior. You got to overview what they're doing. Because these are human beings with their biases. You have racism throughout the system. I don't care if you're talking about banking, real estate, whatever you have. Okay, it's everywhere. Things within the system. So you can't leave it to trust a chance that people are going to do the right thing. You have to enforce that they do the right thing. See that they're being ill treatment of citizens, be they black, white, poor, or what have you, by the judge's behavior. The judge is not a damn God. Okay, you got to make sure that you pay attention to what they're doing. Sometimes they think they're gods. Okay, and they were extreme with their bill offering and so forth. Some of the stuff just blows my mind. But there's no blowback on the judges. Okay, they have to serve the people as well. They have to serve the citizens as well. We pay them. It's just that don't let them get away with it. So there needs to be organizations that watch what they're doing. Trend it out and see what they're doing. You'll see what these are racist will figure it out. You'll see what they're being unfair to poor people about. You'll see what they're doing to women and children. You'll see it. Okay, you'll see if they're selling children in the jail system and juvenile system. This happens throughout this country. What makes you think bail would be any different? Any industry in this country, there's going to be remnants of racism and prejudice in all systems in this country.
So if I can follow up on that.
Sure.
Is there a legislative mechanism that can be considered to do just this, the monitoring and evaluation? We're talking about the imposition of bail, considering economic and minority disenfranchisement and everything else that you're talking about with judges. Where does that legislative solution come from?
Well, there's nothing on the books, but anything this community comes up with, okay, that we can take to Nashville and pass, it can become law. Whatever it is, okay? We just have to have the votes to pass it, okay? It doesn't matter, but if you don't have the votes, we have to keep lobbying, raising civil disorder and disobedience for this to become a law if we think it's necessary. So yes, it can happen. Okay? And it's something that, hey, partially the reason we is try to look at those things and introduce it. If it makes sense, the community wants it, that's what we'll try to do. But yeah, we can do all of it if we can get the votes. 51 votes on one side and 17 on the other side to pass it. Yes, sir. And we have to look at it. But obviously, like this problem, there's a problem. There's so many problems in the community. This has not been the top concern in our community. So, all right, there are many things on the total vote, okay, especially with inflation. People trying to pay rent high as I don't know what food growth. These things are not at the top of the food chain in terms of people concentrating on. By the people just performing these kinds of things around our country, it becomes more focused upon.
I have some models that I could recommend around some community center stuff. because it has been a focus depending on the community that you look at. And so because it's been something that we've been working with for the last 7 years at BLM, we know that two things have worked really well. Is that I hear you on the mechanism about electronic monitoring. For me, I don't think I think anything that is currently confirmed as a use of punishment to try to flip it is going to cause problems with folks' civil rights down the line. When I think about participatory defense models, Silicon Valley and Debug has been instrumental in both helping folks deal with their crimes and having a community release system where folks are released into community, and community helps hold circle. You have Inside Circle, the restorative justice training process that has been working inside and outside of prisons that can both work to help folks who are in prison and folks who are being released hold and be part of community. And there are accountability mechanisms built into those. So there are ways that those community opportunities can be added into pretrial services or release services. There are several major alternative support services models that are available and have been working in Oakland and Seattle. So there are community mechanisms that can be brought to the forefront to talk about what are the ways that we can keep somebody from dealing with the repercussions of being a criminal before they have been accused. And then I just also want to point the difference between jail and prison, because I think it's important to know for the stat that earlier is that people in jail, the majority of them are being held before, right? Prison is when you have been charged in most instances, jail is before. So the population, the full population, the majority of that population are people who have not been convicted. And so I want us to know and see that so that we don't think that that is the place where folks are being held who have been convicted and be moved to try to treat them like that. But there are community reform models that speak specifically to that.
Any criminal justice reform has to address mental health. Our jails, our county jails have become the largest mental health providers in our communities. And so you have a revolving door. Someone gets arrested, they come in, they get on their medications, they get stable, they get released, they get off their meds, and they start having problems, and it's just a freaking revolving door. And also we have the same problem on drug use.
I'm going to interrupt and rein everybody back in because there's so much rich opportunity to dive into all aspects of the criminal justice system, including mental health. But I want to stay focused on bail here. So
if I could, on bail, there's a couple of points that have been made about the bail that I think bail argument that I think deserves some addressing. First of all, I want to endorse everything that County Mayor Lee Harris said about the reform here in Shelby County, and just add a little bit more. The reform contemplates a prompt bail hearing within 48 hours in which both defense counsel and prosecution can be present. And it also says that there has to be an inquiry into wealth. And there has to be a measure of what is affordable and what is not affordable bail. And there can be no unaffordable bail imposed unless the prosecution bears the burden by clear and convincing evidence that it is the least restrictive means and it is required to secure the person's presence, either because they're a danger to the community or they're a flight risk. It seems to me that is a good model to start with if you have to have bail. You were asking, well, how do you do it in such a way that it doesn't have racial disparities? No system is perfect, and I agree that the computer algorithms have proven to be racially discriminatory in some ways. But let's just compare to what? The racial disparities in a system in which there isn't cash bail, or it's like the form that I just outlined, it may not be perfect, but it is going to be certainly less than the racial disparities that you're going to have in our current system with bail. So I think you need to keep that in mind. Now, several people have said, well, you can't just do away with it entirely. I mean, that's just, we can't even think about that. Well, the federal system largely has. And the federal system, for the most part, doesn't really use cash bail as we see it. Now, you could say, oh, well, dismissal rates are higher in those jurisdictions that do it. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. If a particular jurisdiction has 60% dismissal rates, it might be because a lot of those cases don't deserve to be brought.
And a lot of the cases over very minor things, or they're not, meritorious cases. So the fact that you have a relatively high dismissal rate doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad system. And finally, we talked about, monitoring, and I think we should explore monitoring. I think we should definitely explore it. Not for misdemeanor cases, but for serious cases, maybe it's a good idea. But I also want to point out that in those jurisdictions that have tried this, non-coercive means to assure appearance, like automatic texting to remind people of court dates, has proven very effective in reducing failure to appear. A large percentage of the failure to appear is not some sort of willful, I'm going to, escape to Rio de Janeiro. It's because people, these are people tied up in the system and they forget and they don't keep their appointments. So there are non-coercive means that can secure that. And then finally, there was a point made about the back and forth about rising crime and stuff. Really, when you look at it, those jurisdictions that have tried bail reform, those particular defendants that have been released on bail have not reoffended at a higher rate than those jurisdictions that had the status quo system. So the nexus between bail reform and rising crime just isn't there in the empirical data.
Yeah, I don't think that's true at all. I don't think that's true.
We're going to come over here in a little bit. I got a pecking order, but Attorney Good was taking vigorous notes and shaking his head, so I want to give him the opportunity to jump in on that, and then we'll talk around it a little bit.
Well, I appreciate what we're hearing, because that's kind of a confirmation of what's been tried in other jurisdictions. And you see the continuing theme. You see a pressure to change. It's from this concept of people they'll come back to court, and most people miss because other reasons that nobody remind them, but that's the whole point. Criminal cases are different than any other case. You can't go forward with the case without the person. So if they miss court, you have to wait for them. You have to put their case on hold. And the problem we have is we have an overrun criminal justice system right now. And so if you now suddenly, overnight, with a new system where we're going to be more forgiving, we're going to give, it's going to now take a week or a month instead of 2 weeks to resolve a case, you've now increased your backlog by 200%. You're going to need double the amount of courts that you currently have to resolve the same number of courts you have, just because of the failure to appear rate. So I think we're not realizing the bad ramifications of the short-term decisions that we're making and how expensive they are. And then the last thing I'll make is we've heard now multiple times that these people have been charged, they're presumed innocent, and that should impact bail. That is an issue that has been addressed by multiple courts across the country, and the presumption of innocence is a trial issue, not a bail issue. What you're posting when you post bail is what the assurance that you'll come back and address your criminal case. It dates back all the way back to the Magna Carta, where you were charged and the king held you until he didn't want to hold you anymore. That's what keeps them from holding you. And so we should be celebrating bail is the thing that prevents the state from holding you beyond for no reason. But it has nothing to do with the presumption of innocence. And I know we keep hearing that as rhetoric, but it's been rejected by every court that's addressed it. Bail addresses what assurance you have to appear for court. Presumption of innocence applies for trial. That's just the law. And anything else is just rhetoric.
Thank you so much.
All right, quickly. I think we had talked about a lot of things. It all seems to point back to the judge. And when it goes back to the judge, it's very subjective. If we talk about what's reasonable for one person, it's all relative. What's affordable for me is not affordable for you. And how do they really take the time to look at that? Like I say, I think I'm the only person on here that's actually literally practicing bondsmen that go to court and do stuff here on a regular basis. I see this. I see how they rush people through the system. They do that. There's no checks and balances, so they can pick and choose who they want to keep, who they don't want to keep, and that's not fair. When we talk about boggling the federal system, well, it's different. They have resources. They have an entire task force called U.S. Marshals to go get people when they don't go to court. Guess who does it on the local level? The bondsman. There's no burden on the taxpayer right now, because we take that. If you don't go to court, guess what? We go get them. And one other thing that we do as bondsmen, what we're forced to do by law, notify each defendant, each client of their court dates. is one thing that we do. So I have to reject and say that that is not the case why people miss court on a regular basis. Some people have a lot of cases going on and they get confused. Sometimes their job won't let them off. There's other things. But not knowing the court date, not knowing it's your responsibility to go to court, that you're waiting on somebody to remind you, even though there's something that we do as bondsmen, that's what we're required by law, is to let them know every week we call our clients and let them know it. So I can't say that that is a large part of why people miss court. It's just like, that's just not true.
Hey, let me get in for just 30 seconds because I've heard it a couple times here, and I think there is some area of consensus building around really understanding the performance of the judicial actor and all of this. And so one area where all of us may agree is if we did have statistics on judicial performance, then that would be very insightful as to what judges are doing across courtrooms. For example, in Shelby County, we certainly are tracking lots of different things. But reporting that out, I'd love to have a rule that required me to report it out so that I could bring it forward, right? Because obviously there's a lot of stakeholders here, a lot of politics here, and one way to address it is a law that requires some reporting out of judicial performance, and I think that would be very revealing.
So remember, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. So if you don't acknowledge it, then what you call the dog whistle, we understand all that.
You got to get the data.
Okay. I'm just going to make a lot of different points just real quick. Number one, in LA, although the law didn't change, the application of law changed through the new DA. We have a liberal DA. And so a lot of people are being turned out for fairly serious crimes, and they're committing more crimes. And then as a result, people are feeling the need to protect themselves, and then we get a rise in the murder rate. My point is that, and it's great we're concerned with defendants, we should be. I'm a defense attorney, obviously I am, dedicate my life to that. But we can't forget about the community. And we can't forget about the victims. Because the problem is you're trying to fix something over here this way, and then you're making a bigger problem over there. And so you really got to consider all those issues. I don't think the courts are overrun. I think that's nonsense. I think we're lazy. I think we've got a lot of lazy prosecutors, defense attorneys, and judges. And I'll tell you straight out, court is supposed to start at 8:30. It never starts at 8:30. They start at 9:30. They're supposed to run till 4:30. They cut it off at 3 o'clock. Okay? They're not doing their jobs. That's the thing that you have to look at. It's not just the judges. It's the prosecutors. It's the defense attorneys. The whole system is built to railroad you. That's the issue. So when you're fixing bail and you're fixing all this, you got to consider the global situation. Federal system. No, that's never going to work. Don't mirror that. It's a very complicated system where they either detain you or they don't. Don't want to end up in a position where somebody in black robe says, you have no way of getting out. Trust me, you don't want that for yourself. In the federal system, if they are letting you out, it's a complicated scenario where you have to post your property, do this, do that. They don't have a simple way for you to get out, so then you're still stuck. So don't mirror the federal system. You won't like it, and it won't work.
Let me make one. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Just the last point on that, because you made something that was actually going to be, we're coming towards the end of our conversation here. The last question we're going to pose to everybody. My little side comment will be that in the federal system, they typically don't charge unless they have a 90% assurance that they're going to get conviction anyway. So the charging mechanisms leading up to an arrest are entirely different. But you made a point that we haven't brought into this conversation, which I think is really important. We focused a lot on the process and the structures. We have focused a lot on those that are being arrested pre-trial and held or released on bond. What we haven't talked about is the victims and what the impact of bail reform or the application of bail is on those that have been victimized. What is that process? How do we take that as a huge part of the consideration in this? When looking at any reform mechanism, is that we are talking about people who have been victimized by crime, some of them very seriously.
Can I use one last thought? I'm sorry, because I don't want to forget it's a good idea. She raised the point of people not getting to court. They could start a court Uber. They can start a system for people that are having trouble getting to court. Anyway.
I've started working with a victims' rights group. It's called crimesurvivors.com. And I learned something new about bail reform from this group. And it's really kind of startling. You have victims of spousal abuse, and they get the courage, they file charges, but they get immediately released, or they don't even get arrested, they get cited. And so what she's telling me is that victims are having to go into hiding. Criminal justice system is not, they're not looking for that anymore. That's an afterthought because they don't believe the criminal justice system is actually looking out for them anymore. And that's really kind of awoken me more. And I just want to make one point. The DA made a good point, or he made a point about their new system, which is no deportable bail unless the DA has clear convincing evidence offered within 48 hours. They tried this in Harris County, Texas, and the DA came out and said, there are cases for murder where we don't want to disclose our evidence within 48 hours. We don't want them to know it. And so the DA's having to choose, well, if we don't put it on, they're going to get released. Well, in that situation, who's standing up for the victim? And so I think sometime in bail reform, it gets lost. And you can see that in Louisiana and in LA where the DA's office just point blank said, well, we think the defendant is the victim, not the victim themselves. And we're losing sight of that.
In LA, they issue protective orders. So, like in a domestic violence case, it's basically like a restraining order.
I also just want to point out about the system of bail reform that we're talking about here in Shelby County. One, love that point about data, Mayor Lee Harris. Would love to see you push that with us, the collection. And if we could do that locally, I think collecting the data, whether legislatively or not, is a need. But the bail reform came about in Memphis because community was at the table. And that's why some of those solutions have more. And some of these solutions feel good. I also just want to point out before we go through the ending comments that there is no difference between victims, accused, and community. Community holds all three of them. And it is our responsibility to always understand that at any point in time, our roles in this will change to reflect it. And so you should not be thinking about victims and perpetrators as people outside of you. You should always be thinking about what happens when it's you. And then just the last point about reforms and possibilities in mental health and the things that are available in jail. That is part of why defund was a push. It was not to say that we don't need laws. It was not to say that we don't need supervision. It was to say that it is a shame that most of what folks need that leads to crime is only available in that system. And so when we talk about this, we talk about the system, we have to acknowledge that if we don't have mental health supports, housing, good transportation, or the things that folks will need, and that becomes a reason why they might not go to court. We also need to acknowledge that they reset shit all the time in court that ain't got nothing to do with it here. I have you reset court dates reset all the time. And trial is where you get found guilty or innocent, but you might not go to trial in Memphis for 3 years, and it ain't got nothing to do with the system. And bail. The other thing about bail bondsmen in this issue, because as a person who goes to pay bail and goes to court, what I know is when those cases get dismissed, when you pay a bail bondsman, they don't get their money back. When those charges get dismissed, if you found not guilty, you don't get your money back. If you go through a full trial process, so we can't acknowledge this and not think about all the ways everybody benefits that's not a victim or a perpetrator, and how that dichotomy puts us against each other versus looking at this from this is if this were me all the time.
And just on the question of victims, other speaker a moment ago made an excellent point. There are some cases, like domestic violence cases or special victims unit cases, where there may very well be a significant danger that the offender, or the accused offender, if released, will re-victimize pending trial. That's why we have protective orders. And that's why in those cases, when there is, legitimate concern, that's where the danger to public safety factor comes in. And that would be a strong argument for pretrial detention. I don't think any of us disagree with that. I mean, I think it's...
I disagree with it because that's where you have a lot of false accusations is domestic violence cases.
Yeah, well...
So I don't want to be detained
Okay,
because my wife is wanting a divorce.
It is a complicated issue, and I don't dismiss anybody's opinions and thoughts, and I'm grateful for this conversation because it's enlightened me today. The only thing I want to wrap up on it, I appreciate all of you. You all have offered some very good insight. And I actually like rebuttal because I think that you get a better product when everybody is strong on their point, whether you agree or not, and seeing how somebody else thinks. So that is very good, and we appreciate all of you. A couple things just to tweak in my head, just for you to think about. When you guys talked about the dismissal, I wonder if the dismissal rate leads to your second panel discussion of over-policing. So keep all your thoughts and energies when you go into the second panel on that. And also, my question as a layperson, I went back and looked at the whole 8th Amendment thing and read as much as I could about it. I don't understand why the judges wouldn't. The whole 8th Amendment thing, the way the Constitution reads, is supposed to be like, when they make the bail, it's supposed to take into account how much money you have or your status or if you're going to leave. So if bail is necessary, why is it not being done the way you're doing it now, where I thought I read it said you got 3 days to get a person before a judge, and then the judge has to decide whether or not what the bill is said monetarily. Are we not in violating people's 8th Amendment rights by holding them for this long, extended period of time without even giving them a chance to go?
Well, we've got a constitutional law professor. I'll defer to him, but I do think that it is something about judges running for re-election. Sometimes an easy course is to keep those accused of a crime incarcerated. It is something about the practicality of bringing someone a few hundred feet to appear for a hearing, even if it's a continuance, than having to go get them from their house and having a bail bondsman or fugitive task force looking from the house. So something about just the operation of the courts. They feel like it's a little bit easier to keep them there, and they push to the side some of the constitutional questions. That's my feeling, but I'll go to the constitutional law professor.
The Constitution just says there can be no excessive bail, but that doesn't necessarily mean, by its plain terms, nor has it been interpreted as requiring in every instance that there be a detailed inquiry into the financial needs of the defendant. For good or ill, it's not been, all we know is that the bail can't be excessive. That doesn't necessarily.
So that verbiage about a timely fashion, does that not have any relevance? Right.
It doesn't really apply to bail in that sense. And I think as a policy matter it should, but all I'm just telling you is that the Supreme Court has not interpreted the very, very spare and general and vague language. That doesn't really go into any detail. It is not interpreted as requiring the kinds of safeguards you're talking about, but I think there should be such safeguards, and I'm glad they're going to be present in such.
I was very pleased with Shelby County. That was just my personal thing, and we appreciate all of you. And now we got to wrap it up. That's the Wrap TV sign.
So that's Wrap TV?
It is indeed.
Oh my God. Well, so let me just finally say this. Out of this, I mean, there should be some takeaways. And out of it, there are many things that have been said that you have to take. More problems kind of problem in just one conversation. There are 3 or 4 things I think that need to be taken away. As I said earlier, we need to get the data on all this stuff that people are talking about so we can figure out where the bodies are really buried and try to address it based upon that. At the end of the day, you still got to be fair to each side. And another thing you got to really, really recognize this day, if you don't incarcerate certain people for doing certain fights to certain people, somebody can about to kill them. So if you break somebody's child, okay, all right, I can tell you what men are talking about. If something happens to their family member, this or another, if the police don't get them, they will. And you never know what you will do, or I will. Okay? You cross that line if you want to, and I'm going to get you a high party. It's just that simple. You got a lot of men that feel that way. So there's a safety mechanism in there to keep people safe until they can get some justice. But men, a lot of men have a lot of conversations on a lot of things that we're not such.
And that's a future panel.
I want to thank.
That's kind of sexist.
On behalf of Equal Justice Now, I genuinely want to thank all of you for coming here, being willing to sit and have a conversation that is so very important, and put yourself on the line for that conversation. It matters in the conversation that we're trying to have nationally about what does the future look like, and you were all willing to participate here. Deeply thankful that you came and gave us your time here this evening. We are going to be taking a very short break and resetting for our second panel on opportunity to invite you to take one. I'd like to ask all of you to just give a round of applause for all of us.